Here are some basic steps to follow if you want to write your first novel and don't know where to start. As a published author, I can't tell you how many people reach out to me because they want to write a book, but they just don't know how to start. My initial advice is always some form of create a plot, then write the book. Now, obviously, it's much more complicated than that, which is probably why I get a lot of blank stares followed by some variation of, but how? So, to hear my processes, let's go. Step number 1, craft your story idea. For many people who ask me how to start writing a project, it often starts and stops on this step. Why? Because conceptualizing an entire novel is no easy feat. It seems like many people want some magical potion to help them create the next blockbuster novel, but unfortunately, no such potion exists. If you don't have a basic idea, the foundation, if you will, to build your book upon, then you don't have a book to write. I can give prospective authors practical writing advice that has worked for me, but neither I nor anyone else can lay your foundation for you. That burden belongs to each individual writer. And until you figure out this crucial foundational step, you'll never be able to progress beyond step 1. So, develop an idea, ask yourself what if, and write down several alternate paths that your story could take. Choose the path that holds the most promise to build excitement, then build your story from a paragraph to a chapter, and finally to a full manuscript. It's all about building, building, building. Step number 2, develop your characters. The hallmark of every great novel begins with great characters, and great characters require things like backstories, physical descriptions, differing personalities, and a purpose for being there. You need all sorts of main characters and side characters to float in and out of your story to keep it interesting. Your main characters need to have external and internal motivations. For external motivations, in the fantasy genre, maybe they need to save themselves, their family, or their society from a predatory force. Think Avatar. In romance, maybe someone's quaint local bookstore is about to be gobbled up by a ruthless chain. Think You've Got Mail. You get the idea. There needs to be some sort of external conflict. Readers want to see your characters in the ups and downs of dealing with the conflict throughout the entirety of the book. For internal motivations, maybe the character wants desperately to find love, but past hurts keep them from becoming too involved with the object of their affection. There needs to be internal conflicts. How do they overcome this internal obstacle and fall in love even when they don't want to? Or maybe your character did another character wrong, so you need to write in a shocking revenge plot. How do you manifest the revenge plot? How does the character put the plan for the revenge into motion? How does the other character respond to the plot against them? How does the revenge affect other characters around them? How does the revenge plot end for all the characters involved? And don't forget, you need to make your characters complex by giving them a mixture of internal and external motivations. Maybe the good guy is good overall, but they have flaws that call their goodness into question for a time in the story. Or maybe the bad guy did something bad because of an unfortunate incident in the past that left him no choice but to react in a way that left the perception of badness. Then, maybe you could give him a redeeming quality of some sort. In short, don't make the good guy so nauseatingly good or the bad guy so frustratingly bad that you create unlikable, irredeemable characters. Whether good or bad, most everyone has different layers to their personalities. Even good guys can be bad on some level, and even bad guys can have a sliver of a good side. Take the time to show the duplicities in your characters. Your readers will thank you for it. Step number 3, create your world. I don't know about you, but when I think of world building, in my mind, I often think of epic fantasy worlds like The Hunger Games or Game of Thrones. But even if you're writing a sugary sweet contemporary romance novel, or maybe an adrenaline-pulsing thriller, you still need to build the setting of the novel in a way that keeps readers engaged. What is the overall environment of the novel? Does it take place on a scorching desert or a tropical island? What makes the world setting riveting for the reader? Is it a sexy rocker taking readers on a deep dive into the glitz, glamour, and excitement of fame and fortune? Maybe it's an Amish setting that depicts the simpler ways of life. Is it a fantasy land with purple trees, pink skies, and bizarre creatures found only in your imagination? Whatever the main setting, remember that you must set the scene through the entire book, not just in the beginning. Your characters will most likely navigate through a wide range of settings through the book, so be sure to show the readers in every chapter what they see, what they smell, and the tensions they face. That said, you also need to find a proper balance between setting the world and information dumping useless facts. If you have a restaurant scene, the readers don't need to know that Bob ordered a 12-ounce ribeye, a loaded baked potato, steamed asparagus, and creme brulee for dessert, and that Jane ordered baked salmon with steamed rice and buttered broiled green beans, a salad with ranch dressing, and peach cobbler. No. I can't tell you how many times I've seen such tedious details in a book, and I'm sure you have too. The readers also don't need to know that while at dinner, the characters are chewing and swallowing between tidbits of conversation. I think we all have been eating enough to know that people chew and swallow their food, so that's unnecessary storytelling that you can cut. Honestly, in my first couple of novels, I made the same information dumping author mistakes too, so I'm not criticizing. I'm giving you advice based on what I've learned. So make a point of staying away from mundane facts and stick only with details that will compel your readers to keep plowing ahead rather than boring them to death. Step number 4, choose your point of view. Before starting your book, you need to choose the point of view in which you will write. The most common points of view are first person, which uses I and we pronouns, second person, which uses you pronouns, and third person, which uses she, he, they, and it pronouns. Depending on your genre, you may need to research what is industry standard. It doesn't mean you have to follow it, but it's good information to consider. Many genres use a specific POV. For instance, the fantasy genre often uses third person because the worlds are so radically different that it can be hard for a reader to connect to a world that's so far from reality. Whereas romance often uses first person because readers like to be in the character's shoes. Personally, I hate first-person POV regardless of the genre, and I often skip books that are written in that POV because I just don't enjoy stories told from the I perspective. To me, and this is just me, the first-person POV feels like an amateur writing style. You may feel differently about it, and that's fine too. But for me, I prefer the third person. One of the most difficult things for many new authors is to maintain the same POV through the entire book. It takes a conscious effort to stay in POV, and it's annoyingly easy to slip into a different one and not even realize it. So from the beginning, train yourself to watch your POV. If you start in first person, then the entire book needs to be consistent. Pick one and stick with it. Typically, a novel is written from the perspective of one single character, but I tend to buck tradition on this one by writing in third person omniscient, meaning the POV in my book switches from one character to another. Even in this POV, we must be careful to write in a way that it's clear when the POV has changed from one character to the next. I usually accomplish this by using section breaks within chapters. I never let two characters have a dueling POV in the same chapter. When I want to switch from one character's POV to another, I put a section break in the chapter, then switch to the new character POV. According to Writer's Digest, third-person POV is the most accepted from the publishing industry perspective. According to publishing statistics, editors in major publishing houses vastly prefer third-person POV. Whatever you choose, though, train yourself to be consistent. Step number 5, outlining your novel. This step often creates a bone of contention among authors because, as with most things in writing, there are a couple of ways to do it. There are the tried and true plotters and the tried and true pantsers, and whichever method an author chooses, to them it's the only way of doing it. So what's the difference between the two methods? I'm glad you asked. Plotters outline their entire book before they start the writing process. By the time they start writing, they have a full outline and know every major plot and twist that will take place in every chapter. It doesn't mean they won't deviate in small ways from the outline as the story expands and progresses, but for the most part, they'll stay true to the major components of the outline. Pantsers, on the other hand, are the total opposite. Typically, they don't plot their story. They sit down and figure it all out as they go. They fly by the seat of their pants. So who's right and who's wrong? It depends on who you ask. If you're writing for a traditional publishing company, more than likely they'll want you to complete an outline before you start the manuscript. It's their way of seeing what they're getting before they get it. If you get picked up by a major publisher, resign yourself to learning the art of outlining. Most writing experts will say that authors must be plotters. In typical rebel fashion, though, as an author, I tend to fall somewhere in the middle of the plotter versus pantser drama. I'm not a full plotter. I always start my project with a firm knowledge of how it'll start and how it'll end. I also know what major story arcs my characters will face and how I'll resolve them. I enjoy stories with the complexity of a subplot, so if I have one, I also know what my subplot is and how it'll weave into the main story. I tend to be less dogmatic in plotting versus pantsing. Every writer has a method that feels natural and right, so I say find out where your groove is and go with it. Step number 6, your beginning. Start your book with a slam-bang beginning to reel your reader in, and then do your darndest to keep them until the end. In literary terms, this is called the inciting incident. It's when something happens to your character that potentially changes some aspect of their life in a drastic way. Books often start with a major event that forces characters to realize that nothing will be the same for them again, or at the very least, that they have a huge struggle to work through to come out on top again. In heist or crime books, this is often accomplished with the opening chapter starting in the heat of the crime. Then, in subsequent chapters, it traces back in time to build the story around the inciting incident. Even if you don't start your novel with a major incident, there needs to be some sort of inciting event that touches your character in a major way. Step number 7, the middle of your book. You've captured your reader's attention with a great beginning. Now you need a stellar middle, which is where so many authors tend to lose steam. An author's job is to keep up the momentum throughout the middle of the books by keeping all the meaningless fluff to a minimum. You want to build high stakes and struggles for your characters to go through in the middle part. You want them to succeed then succeed and fail again until they eventually conquer the world. Think of your writing like the ocean waves that ebb and flow. Sometimes huge waves come in and pound the sand with ferocity. Sometimes they roll in nice and gentle. And sometimes there's no waves at all. It's the same with your writing. You don't want it to be constant friction in action, but you also don't want large segments of nothing interesting. Build your story in a way that makes your readers cry, then let them laugh. Make them angry, then let them be happy. Let them see their successes, then let them live through their failures. Step number 8, the ending. There's light at the end of the tunnel. You, along with your characters, have been through a sundry of emotional experiences. You've reeled them in with an amazing beginning. You've labored to build a layered story that takes readers from one emotional plane to another. Now, maybe the biggest hurdle of them all is to give them a climax that leaves them dreading those 2 final words, the end. One thing I want to caution you against is leaving your book open in a cliffhanger. While it might feel exciting for the author to leave the reader wondering what's coming next, readers for the most part don't like it. Many want it all wrapped up in a pretty little bow. As a reader, I don't mind a few loose ends that could be the focus of the next book in the series. To me, it gives you a little something to look forward to in the next book. Every reader has their idea of what a pleasing ending is, so remember you can't please everyone no matter how hard you try. Make sure your ending is complete. Or if it's a series book, make sure it's complete enough to leave a sense of satisfaction. This is where beta readers can help you out. I highly suggest you get a few beta readers and listen to as much of their advice as possible prior to publishing. I hope you found enough information in this video to finally start your dream of writing a novel. If you enjoyed any of this, please give the video a thumbs up. If you want to be notified when I release more content, please subscribe to my channel. Thanks, and I'll talk to you soon.